Hello, this is a follow-up video or an update to the farm efficiency tool. As far as file size, it might be a little bit smaller than the other one was. I'm going to call this version 2.0. For those who didn't watch that video, you probably should go watch it. I mean, you really need to, otherwise you'll be totally lost. At some point towards the beginning of that video, I also talk about how to run code in Microsoft Excel if you've never heard of doing that before. But anyway, first thing that those who've seen that video will notice, the design sheet now has the same dark theme that the normal sheets do. It may not be noticeable, but the squares are actually smaller than what they were before, so a much smaller font size is occupying the same space as before. There is no overlap sheet. Also, I now just have it that you double click in here when you're in the design sheet, because this is really the only time that you're going to be using it. And I have the panes frozen so that when you move left and right and up and down, the overlap is going to always stay in the top left corner. So no matter how much space you use in the sheet, you can always press the button. So I have tried to use the old colors for the images to overlap, and it's really hard to see. I'll have them here. If you like those and you want to use it, you can kind of see the overlap, and they kind of look rounded, even though that they're straight actually. The way the colors are, yeah, they kind of look pillowed somewhat. So I'm just going to show you an alternative that I came up with for this dark theme. What's really bright is what the overlap is. Those who may not like these stars on the images, well, if you just go to the right of the sheet here, I have, this is not an image, these are actual cells, or you can think of as tiles, like in Knights and Merchants. But here you can just click on this and delete the symbol or the character. If I go to the Home tab, you can see that this is the Wingdings font, and this is the Mew character. I have an image beneath each of these that you can just copy and paste however many times you need it. Let me just briefly show you how to do that. All you have to do if you want to make your own custom colors to see how it looks, to make these images, you just need to select exactly like this and copy with Control C. Make sure you're in the Home tab and then go to Paste and then go to this picture U, and then once you do, press Escape once and you have an image. Now you're going to right click on here and say Size and Properties, and when you do, this pane is going to come up on the side. Just click the far right image and then say Transparency, and you can just type in 50 for 50% and press enter. Then once you do, then I'm just going to cut this image and paste it down here so we can see it's a little bit darker, right? It's the same thing as before, and as you can see, when I click somewhere, it snapped to the grid. Okay, so I copied this with Control C and I'm going to say Control V, so now we have two different images that we can overlap as so. And another thing to mention is that the sensitivity of the overlap feature is a little bit less severe than it was last time. Just selecting the top half of these images, for example, and then double left clicking on overlap will automatically create it for you without giving you an error message. So I'm going to just X out the pane on the side so we can just see this bigger, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to press D, the D key, to delete it, or I showed how to delete it before in the previous video. Just double left click on this and then say yes, but I've just been right clicking on this and pressing the D key and pressing enter. If I copy this and I would come here and use these instead of these images with the stars, just to see if we can see things clearer, it is clearer and you can still see overlap, but I wanted to come up with something that was even better than this, or potentially better, for those who understand overlap but just want this to actually help them determine what's the best position place farms that overlap before they choose the roads and the fields. In the far right, I have this one, so I'm going to copy this image and make another copy of it once I click somewhere here and paste it, and then paste again with Control V. So this one I think is really good because when it's bright yellow, you're going to see two different figures. You're going to see skulls, which are the most valuable fields or tiles relative to each farm. Each farm looks identical, right? The guy who's alive, whoever he is, if someone who knows who he is, I don't know, but he is a very valuable tile also relative to the farm, but not as valuable as the skulls. So the skull means that it's death to your farm efficiency, basically. So the way it works is when they overlap, this skull here is the absolute worst. You lost the most here with this overlap. And when you have the live person, it's a medium loss per se, but it's a little bit more than medium, but you can think of it that way. So if you just drag them down like this, then you can see here this is even worse position because now we have 2 pure skulls, we can say, and we have 4 medium skulls here, which means that when they're in green, it's just one of the farm's most valuable skull tiles, most valuable tiles are canceled out by the other farm. So this is happening on both sides, but again, the ones in the middle means it's both farms' most valuable tiles are canceling each other out. And clearly here we have a mixture of the skull and the living man. This is the same as this one, even though they look a little different. I tried my best, but this image is on top of this image, so that's just how it works in Excel. But you can think of these as being 3/4 as bad, this one being half as bad, and these being 1/4 as bad or something like that, to try to weigh in how you want to stack these on top of each other and the losses that you can potentially have should you want to put farm fields on any of the tiles that are in the overlap. If someone wants to try to create something, maybe just new colors or new symbols, feel free to make your own custom. They're here for you. Inside of these I have a white border, but on the outside I have the purple that is RGB color code 640128, as is the color of this border up here. This is the same color that was in the first version from the first video, but the white really brings it out and makes the overlap images in here clear. That's why I have the white borders on the inside of the images. But anyway, another thing I did was, let me go ahead and let me overlap these 2 images here, that they're perfectly lined up and they're 1 apart. In the previous video, I would have you to double click on here, and then if you want to have the maximum efficiency for this farm in particular, you would have to use this option, which is max efficiency by selection. It was abbreviated, and then you would just come here and drag around a certain part and then say OK. But now what I have, I'm going to right click on clear because the farm field checkbox is checked. It's going to get rid of the farm fields. For those who've seen the first video know what I'm talking about. But now I have it so that when I double left click on this, I can just say max efficiency, that it's just for this farm. I don't have to select around anything. It makes it easier and faster, but I'll have the other option too, because if, for example, I want to see what the maximum efficiency for this farm is just for, let's say these fields here, given that I have X amount of tiles already here. So let's say I have 11 farm fields here, and I want to choose the maximum efficiency just for these tiles here. This is all I can really afford to work with. Then it's going to select just the ones in that area that I selected to make this farm have maximum efficiency, given that these were already selected. But if you want the whole farm to be selected, then of course you can just double left click to bring up this menu and click on max efficiency. It's going to erase all of the farm fields and put them back so that it has the most efficiency, where the middle number is the average corn per hour, the left is the minimum, and the right is the maximum. Now in this update, there's something I did with the red tiles. There's no real change for the accuracy, or I should say the precision, of the corn per hour when you only put farm fields on the green tiles. So for example, what I did was, let me get rid of both of these. If I were to put tiles, or I should say farm fields, on all of these red in the overlap, we're getting an expected corn per hour of 61.21. This is the original version. The expected corn per hour is 71.67. So which one is right? Can you take a guess? Or which one I should say is much closer to the actual value? It's the new one, of course. Why not? And I can maximize this workspace so that it kind of looks similar to the other one, but we can see that's version 2.0 at the top to know it's the current version. This is the test that I did. I did 29 hours worth, and yeah, it hovers around 63, but it goes to 62.8 or so. So 61 is off, and this is grayed out as the original version was also. Whenever you put at least one farm field on a red tile, so if I clear all these and I would put farm fields here, it wouldn't matter, right? It doesn't get cleared out because this is saying it's guaranteed that this is going to be accurate. As long as you put the farm fields on the green tiles, it's going to be accurate. But as soon as you put one on one of the red tiles, then all of a sudden the research that I did with the scripts and spending probably 9 hours running the scripts in order to get 18,000 rows of data that is inside of a sheet in here. If I come in here and I say unhide, farm efficiency, as I showed in that video, it's 18,000 rows of min, max, and average values based on the sum of the farm field distances from each individual farm. So this is for a single farm For those who didn't see that video, I am just repeating myself, and I'm going to hide that one. And I guess briefly show the model that's also in here that you should not delete. The program actually uses this. It doesn't use these yellow values like I mentioned in the previous video. I could add them in. These are far tiles, but I just don't think I really will because it really doesn't make much of a difference. Just these few here. If anything, I should have tiles that are above the farm because that's what people are typically doing in single player videos on YouTube these days. Just complete inefficiency of farms. But since I'm not doing that, I just decided not to include these far tile in these images and just have this near tile radius perimeter or shape. But anyway, I'm going to hide this now. If we go to import, I can load one map that I know for sure this updated version is off, but the original version was correct. It's saying that the expected corn is 79.41 and minimum is 78. But in the game itself, if you run it, you can see it's around 75 and it's going to stay around 75. This is the previous version where I imported the same thing in here and it's saying 75.07. But overall, the newer version is more accurate for a variety of cases. Cases where you're doing red zone infractions, as I called it in the first video, where you put at least one farm field on red tiles. Another thing I did was, instead of having to double left click if it gets annoying, you can just right click on it. As long as it's not right clicking on the clear button or this button here on the farm, any of the other tiles on the farm is going to bring up this menu. Not really a big deal, but anyway. And these two did not change. But speaking of this one, let me go to the design sheet and space out farms like this. I'm going to copy this and put them down and do it one more time. And in this design sheet, you can see that I added the same left border for zooming in and out. So darker means closer in. I right click on this one and zoom out some, but this one I zoom out enough that I can select around here and double click on the overlap. In the previous video, I mentioned that the conventional vertical stack is 2 apart, but it's actually 1 apart. That's what several people told me, so I wanted to address that now. But basically, if we wanted just to see what this new version gives for this setup, it's saying expected is 75 and minimum is 73 something, almost 74, and average is 76.83. So basically what I'm trying to say is that if you look to the right, I did a pair of 6 here and we're getting numbers around 73 corn per hour per farm. Here's a little bit higher, but basically what I'm trying to say is that for the majority of cases that I've tested, the expected corn isn't correct. The actual value is somewhere between the minimum and the average inclusive. So it could be the minimum or could be the average. So it's a lot less precise. But I didn't really do any tests for these anyway. This was just based on some new logic, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. But let me go back to the design sheet, make these 1 tile apart, and run this overlap again. And I can just put in the tiles here. That's a quick way to do it for those who didn't see the first video. Please go watch it. But okay, now I can zoom in and see what the average corn per hour is. The expected is 71.44. And if we go back to this sheet, we can see that it's 72.7. So that's much closer. But I think in the original version I was pretty close also. But again, for cases like this where it was 71.67 in the original version, but now you can see it's 61, where again if you look to the left here, the true amount is around 63. It was kind of embarrassing the way the original algorithm worked was, and it was an algorithm because it's on the red tiles, it's not the green tiles, which was a result of actual research. It was an algorithm to kind of approximate it, but this one is more accurate overall. Because the way it works is, if we look at these fields and mentally divide it like this between 2 farms, whichever fields are closest to a specific farm, those are the ones that will count towards that farm. But in the original version here, it's saying that there's 20 fields that are for this farm and there are 23 fields that are for this farm. The way it interpreted is that there's a total of 46 fields, double of what there is. So although it didn't really affect the results when you have farm fields only on the green tiles, because it means there is no overlap, they're not possibly shared, it did affect when they were shared. How this original version here was so accurate for this particular case, I'm not quite sure, and I guess it really doesn't matter. But this is how the new algorithm works. As you can see in this version, the numbers on the fields, it's just a number with a decimal. right? But when we come here, we're going to see these ordered pairs. What the second number in the pair means is that it's the farm index. Every farm gets an index starting with 1. So this is actually farm index 1, this is farm of index 2. So all it's saying is that these fields with these values belong to farm of index 2, and this one of course too. The spreadsheet is going to consider that with the corn per hour and all that you see here, and that's how it does it. I had to completely redesign the system, and the tables here that are hidden, which you don't see, but if I double click on maximized, and you can see here that columns B through Y are hidden. There's a table inside of it, which maybe you can see down here, just a little bit of it. If you were to go to review, unprotect sheet, and type in lowercase abc, and I have the sheet password up here. It's lowercase abc is the sheet password, and it's the same password for all the sheets, including the consumer sheet. But anyway, so once I have that done, I need to right click on here and say view code, press Ctrl A, and click on the comment block to comment it all, and I'm going to X out of this window. And what I'll do now is I'll select this as so, and right click on there and say unhide. And when I see that, then I have the table, and I didn't color everything yellow, but there is a table here, and it means something to the script that's running when you make selections in the sheet. It's called sheet code. But anyway, that's what's going on in the background, and I also redid some of my code and took out some code that wasn't needed. These are all the modules here under modules for those who are coders and want to see how this was designed. But anyway, I guess what I could do is import from Fight the Landlord one of the players in there. How about player 6? Just as an example for those who haven't seen the import tool work. I didn't change anything with the import tool. It should be functioning the same. If there's bugs, let me know. Sometimes it will work on some maps and not others. The only thing, I'll come back to the sheet, but the only thing that I really did was, if I click on this map here, which only has one player in it, it doesn't have to be player 1, just one player on the map, it's not going to ask me which player number that I want, like the original version did. See, in the original version, I come here and I go import, and I would import the same map in. It's going to ask me this. It's going to ask me, my choices are for players. Just choose one, and there's only one available. So it would make me, and therefore make you type in 1, even though 1 was the only player number in here. But now you don't have to do that if it's only one player, so that makes it more user friendly. That's the only thing with import I really changed. And I'll come back to this one in a moment. Let's just go take a peek at this. It's pretty neat to see this kind of thing. For those who haven't seen the previous video, let me go to that map. Let me make this player like a blue. You can see him. Yeah, so he has farms up there, and then he has farms down here, and he has vineyards in between. Farms at the bottom, vineyards, and more farms. The farm efficiency of this entire thing is 62.65 corn per hour. If the general convention is relatively correct, it should be between 61 and 63.67, or maybe 60, almost 61, or low 64, somewhere around there. But as I mentioned, people often are using fields that are far above the farms, and these near tile radii shapes or images don't go beyond one row above the farm pretty much, and just one in the middle. And so they're missing fields for these farms like this one. It makes a lower corn per hour, which lowers the overall corn per hour per farm. Okay, I'm going to come to this one now because in the previous video I was saying at the very beginning of it, you don't need certain fields. If you remove them, then the corn per hour rate is going to increase. There are so few fields because there's only one space in between the farms instead of two, that removing some will actually hurt it. If I right click on this to get rid of it, this is a dark red, which means it's shared by more than 2 farms. If I right click on here and I can just say remove those, it removes them all instantly, just in the current sheet. But the expected is 67.83. The actual, when you remove these, if you test it in the game, it's going to be around 68, so it's pretty close, and by default it's going to be around 72 something. So the expected corn is not that far away, but it follows that general trend that it's going to be somewhere between the minimum and the average, including the possibility that it's the minimum or the average, or a little bit less than the minimum or a little bit more than the average. Just a little bit, meaning by decimal. That's just the general trend, but that was the best that I could improve it using some logic of saying I have fields here that are shared between these 2 farms. Let me just visualize them like this instead, and then just go from there. Some additional things I've done, we scroll in, I just want to show you what they do. As you already know from the previous video, you just double left click on this to select all the pictures in this sheet when the time comes that you want to move them all. For whatever reason, it's very easy to do that because selecting one and holding down control to select the next and repeating that process can become exhausting and annoying. We already know that maximize workspace is going to do that. This is not a button, this is just a note here that don't put an image here and then try to say overlap. Just don't do it. Don't put it on this border or this border here. We already know what margins are. It's just that when you make these sheets, you can see here that there's 5 tiles of a margin there, and then there's at least 5 tiles of a margin here, just in case you want to draw buildings like this in your plan sheet somewhere, just to fill in your city, just to figure out where you want to put farm fields. But using the import tool is always faster if you want to do pre-builds or something in the map editor. But what I'm trying to show you is this, that show numbers, just double left click it. So you don't show the numbers anymore because now we have ordered pairs and it's really messy and we don't really need to see it. If we're already familiar with this tool in general, I can just re-import this map by clicking on this. I don't have to browse for it again because it's already here. And now you can see that it put it in. And when you right click on them to make the farm fields, it's going to work the same way. As you can see in the formula bar, they are still there. The spreadsheet doesn't use the numbers in the same way that it did previously. It's a little bit complicated. You'd have to look at the design of the table that's in each of these sheets to understand that. But anyway, another setting we have is include shared tiles in maximum efficiency. This is very useful because if I would come here and I clear these, and maybe the spreadsheet is working faster overall now too. When you want to clear tiles, I think it is. But anyway, if I would right click on here, because that's one way you can do it, or you can double left click, right? If I say max efficiency, it's only going to consider the green tiles because that was what was guaranteed to be very precise or even accurate from the previous video, because these numbers you see are based off the data of the 18,000 row table. But now that I've improved the algorithm for putting farm fields on the red tiles in general, let me just clear this real quick and I would go to design sheet. Now it's just going to, if I would double click this to make it yes, I come back here and I do the same thing. It's going to pretend like red tiles are allowed and that there's no restriction. So it's going to put fields on green or red, but not on these tiles here that have houses on them. But if I would right click on this and then delete that to, in effect, remove those from the equation, or just select them all and then do it at once, I can right click on this and do it again. Just show you right now, none of these tiles were considered, but the bright green tiles will definitely be considered. They're most efficient. These specific colors, so blue and yellow, the sheet recognizes those two colors, that if you go to the code window with alternate F11 and you go to color settings, as I mentioned in the previous video, you can change these colors here, but this is the yellow and this is the blue. These colors are going to be recognized and they will not be erased when you right click on here and say max efficiency or place ideal or remove fields between greater than 2 farms. So both options are available if you want to consider the red tiles or not to consider the red tiles. But it works for selection too. I'll go to max selection and I would just say these tiles here, and of course it's going to make them all farm fields. Why wouldn't it? Because they're all very close to this farm. But if I were to again come here and double click this to make it no, and come back and I say max by selection and I reselect this area, it's going to select all the green ones but not any of the red ones. But yeah, you didn't see that. What it did was it erased all the green ones and it didn't touch the red that was already red. I have to erase them all first so you can see it. So let me do this again. And now you're going to see that's going to leave the red red. I guess that's all I've really done to the spreadsheet. You can test this out for yourself to see the results for different cases. So anyway, that's it. This video is a little bit longer than what I planned it to be, but I guess one final comment I can say for those who don't know if farm efficiency is actually useful, let me just show you inside of the game. Let me go to a pre-build that I have for the Valley of Kings. So in here, the farm efficiency, I can load it in here to see what the farm efficiency is for that. Now, player 1. A quick way is to select around here wherever you want to zoom in, and zoom in with Control and the scroll on your mouse. That's a shortcut in Excel. You can see the farms here, but I can right click on here to see that it's not grayed out, so I didn't have any red zone infractions. My expected corn per hour is 81.16 per hour. That's pretty good. But if you go watch the beginning of that video when you see me build, I can throw up these farms pretty fast, and I had more corn than I needed. I had lots of horses, but not as many because I started iron so late because it was over here. But yeah, but regarding the farms though, it's so easy to build them like this, that the building that they feed is between them. You can have a farm like this, that the road is in the middle instead of on the sides to go up if it's the end of your town. And you can't have it go up one more tile so that you can put a road to come out to the left or the right of that farm later on. But yeah, I produced a lot of corn. Yeah, but just real quick, I can just maximize this. If you have them 3 apart, then that's really all you need to have the most efficient farms or optimal farms next to each other. They're still going to go into each other's space once in a while. The far tile radius is much more than just 3 apart, but I'm just going to overlap these real quick. If we assume that the road is between them and that the road is either of these 2 areas, so either here or here, going vertically, then you can make this optimal. So I can just right click on this and say max efficiency, 81.85, and this one max efficiency, 81.85 again. I guess I can show this one weird example where I have 3 farms and it's in a unconventional way. It's sort of like what you would see in one of the Chinese co-op maps or something. But for this one, as you can see here, the actual number is around 75, 74 something to 75 sometimes. But here in the current version, it's saying the expected is 77.29. So just like this example that it was overestimating, this is the absolute worst though. Saying that it's 78 when it's 75, it's 3 over. This one here, it's 2 over. You can see up here that the minimum corn is not far off. It's still, even with an example like this, that the expected corn is off, the minimum corn is roughly what it is in the game, and so that general trend that it's between the minimum and the average, or it could be the minimum or the average, or a little bit less than the minimum or a little bit more than the average, just by decimal. Follows this test case, if we want to call it that as well. If anybody has any questions or comments, please comment below, and please try this out. For those who haven't seen the first video, if you're watching by this point, I don't know what to tell you except to go watch it. If I make another video about farm efficiency, it'll be me talking about the process of making that table of 18,000 rows of data, and for me to automate it so that you can do it much easier than what I did. So you would just run one script in one window, and you would run it all day for several days, and finally get the full table of data. So if you want to recalibrate the table, so to speak, for later versions of the remake, I did this in R13651. The minimum, average, and maximum corn values you get in this column here, the percentage, I should say, for the expected corn, the percentage is still going to be correct, no matter what the actual amount is. But if you want to go double click on this to go to consumers, to see how many buildings these farms that you have in your build can supply, given that they're all built at the same time and the farms are harvesting, then we probably want to recalibrate it eventually, especially since in R14787 at least, there are 7 stages to the corn's growth cycle instead of the old 5 that it was. So that may affect the amount of time it takes the corn to grow. I'm not sure. That'll be in my to-do list should I have nothing better to do. But until then, this may be the final video I will do on farm efficiency. I will do some videos on woodcutter efficiency and maybe vineyard efficiency as well. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.